Welcome to Yellow Brick House Fundraising Summit. I have with me today author Michael Shuster. Thank you for being with us today. It's a very special day for Yellow Brick House as we are trying to help support children and families that are going through a difficult time. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and the reason why you're here today.
First of all, thank you for having me here. I've been in real estate for well over 20 years, but about 12 years ago, I became Ontario's first divorce real estate specialist. I also became a certified divorce specialist. The way it really came to be is I was approached at a networking event by a lady who said, I really need you to help my friend. And I asked the circumstances. And the short version of the story was this lady, her husband was abusive, left her for another woman. She had 4 kids, and he moved out of the marital home, was not giving her any money to feed the kids. She had cancer. She was going for chemo. The bank was going to force power of sale in 3 months if the house wasn't sold. The story just kept getting worse and worse. The friend said, can you help her? And I said, I'm confident I can. We went to meet with this lady, and I said, I could tell you about my awards and my credentials and everything I do real estate related, but there are a lot of great realtors that can sell houses. I said, what do you need from me? How can I help you specifically? And she said, I'm afraid of my husband. And as a certified negotiator, I've learned everything's in the power of asking questions, peeling that proverbial onion. So I'm thinking to myself, I'm not a police officer or a bodyguard or anything like that. I'm a realtor. So I asked her, what do you mean? She started crying. She explained what she was afraid of. And she asked me probably one of the most popular questions I get asked. If he's moved out, can I change the locks? I'm afraid if he comes in the house. The answer is no. That was the beginning of my education as a realtor of all of the different laws that apply to a matrimonial home in a marriage breakup or separation or divorce. And the answer to this lady's question was both spouses have equal rights to the home unless there is a court order, a restraining order or exclusive right of possession or some sort of court order from a judge. Selling the house was not the hardest part of this. First priority, we had to get her safe. And it would be very hard to sell the house with her in it. It really touched my heart to see what she was going through. I could see she was emotional. That was the first time I had ever heard of Yellow Brick House, and that's where she ended up while I listed and ultimately sold the house. She told me one of her concerns was her husband was going to come to the house. And so what I did different than what other realtors do is rather than just put a lockbox on the door and let people come and go whenever they book an appointment, I told her, I'm going to be here for every showing. I'm not going to put a lockbox. I hold the key. And if he shows up, I'll refuse entry. That was my first divorce case. Now I'm admitting I didn't know what I was doing then. Of course, afterwards I learned I didn't have the right to refuse entry unless there was a court order, like I just finished explaining. But the priority was get her away from harm, both physical, emotional, and mental. So we did that. This was 12 years ago. There were no multiple offers and things like that, but it took a while to sell the house. And ultimately after that sale, my business just started growing by referral. She told her friends. She would talk about all of the things that I did above and beyond what the previous realtors that she had worked with did to deal with the bank, but most importantly, get her safe. And I'm not a lawyer. I couldn't understand why she couldn't get a restraining order. Maybe that's none of my business. But then when she started opening up to me and I had earned her trust, it really became apparent that her lawyer was not doing anything for her, but sending her bills. I'm never one to recommend you change professionals. If your professional is doing a really good job, I wouldn't want anybody to tell a client to replace me unless I was doing a really bad job. So in this case, I said, we got to find you a much better lawyer. We've got to get urgent motions for certain things, and I'll let a lawyer talk to you about what your options are. So we did all of that. It basically turned into that year, 30% of my business were women going through divorce who were afraid of their spouse. And one of the things I wrote about in my book, one thing that makes what I do different as a real estate divorce specialist than anybody else who works for you when you're going through divorce, if you hire a lawyer, a mental health professional, an accountant, or a certified divorce financial analyst, they work for one spouse and one spouse only, confidentially. Unless you're mediating, a mediator will work for both. A realtor selling a matrimonial home, both spouses are effectively my client. So I can't choose sides, but I was obligated internally, emotionally, to protect somebody who's a victim of abuse. So basically 30% of my business were women going through divorce. Ultimately, if I would get the listing, they both become my client. But that's how it just started building by referral, then 40%, then the following year, 50%, until ultimately 80, 90% of my business is very much along those lines. I've had several clients that have gone to Yellow Brick House, and we've had different types of solutions to keep them safe, get the home sold, get them back on their feet successfully.
I have seen Yellow Brick House do many wonderful things. Seeing that someone as professional as yourself, thank you, supporting families, women, and being there to support and holding their hands, moving them forward. That doesn't come that often from a real estate agent. So that shows us how much support is there and
Thank you.
how someone like you can help people.
Mm-hmm.
I've known you for some time now, and your philanthropist site has always been known. You've also had spoken to us about some experiences that you did as a philanthropist when it came to human trafficking and how Yellow Brick House was a support. Would you mind expanding on that for us?
Absolutely. I'm a big believer. Things happen in your life at the right time. You're in the right place for the right reasons. It was unexpected how that happened, but basically, my mother was volunteering at some sort of women's group and the topic of the year that they were focused on was human trafficking. And there was a big presentation at a community center. She was telling all about it, and I was listening, but it didn't really make sense to me yet. She asked me they might need help with the cameras and the sound and stuff like that. I went there as just a volunteer to help with set up chairs and things like that. And they had different police officers and different types of professionals talking about human trafficking, child trafficking, human trafficking. I'll tell you what really hit me in the gut. It's something that we always think happens somewhere else, not here. First, we might think it happens in a third world country. Well, while we're here in Canada, we might think, in the United States, every state, every city has their affluent areas, but also their lower income and welfare areas. And we always think it's someone else's problem somewhere else. The evidence that was shown to me, it's here in Toronto, Thornhill, Richmond Hill, Etobicoke, Mississauga, Brampton, Barrie, St. Catherine. It's everywhere. The recruiting starts in every high school. And I really realized how big the problem is, how close to home the problem is, and how real the problem is. And I just felt compelled to help any way I can. And after I started helping in various capacities, to your point, those people are victims. Some are physically abused, some are mentally and emotionally abused, which I don't think one is worse than the other. Any type of abuse, of course, affects different people differently, but it's all very real. And Yellow Brick House has always been there for people that needed it.
How did Yellow Brick House help in those processes?
Like I said, when I'm selling a house, whatever type of scenario somebody is a victim of any type of abuse, fear is the top of the list. Some people are just afraid to get into relationships. Other people are afraid to step out the front door. And so it gives them a safe place to go. It gives them somewhere where they can actually hopefully sleep at night and not only stay safe, but in their own mind and in their own heart, not feel at risk, while hopefully they get the help to get better or more confidence and move forward.
I know that you work and you've been trained in negotiating and high conflict personality disorders. Sometimes when people trying to separate and get divorced, some of the reasons could be mental disorders that are in a family violence situations like bipolar or narcissism. Is there anything you'd like to tell us about some of the experiences that you know of, that you've dealt with client, or something that you can share with us that Yellow Brick House again can provide that safe space for the individuals?
Mm-hmm. Well, sadly, I could talk for hours about it, but I'm not just a real estate divorce specialist that understands the laws that apply to selling a matrimonial home in a divorce or a marriage breakdown. I have the Certified Divorce Specialist designation, which has nothing to do with real estate. And I know you know Andrea Klein, who wrote a book, How to Divorce a Narcissist. I met Andrea there in 2019. That program is for real estate, law, mental health, financial, all-encompassing professionals. It's about understanding the big why people are how they are, why they do what they do. And a day and a half of it was all about narcissistic personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, high conflict personalities. And so, like I said, I'm also a certified negotiator. And where those two combine is I used to teach negotiating after I became certified. And I always say, it's not about, beat my chest, it's my way or the highway, dig your heels in and stand your ground. That's not negotiating. That's bullying. Negotiating is about learning the right questions to ask, genuinely caring about getting to the root of what motivates the other person, why. And so what I tried to do, because I also went through my own divorce. I chose to end the marriage, turned out to be a loveless, empty marriage. And I didn't realize several years after I was divorced. In fact, I was in Miami sitting in this program, learning about narcissistic personality disorder, and light bulbs went off in my head where I realized all the years where my self-confidence, my self-esteem was all shot to nothing was the result of being a victim of a narcissist. If you potentially get two people that want to sell a house and one's a narcissist and they can't communicate, the spouses can't communicate. Narcissism is all about control, power. Usually it's not about the money or the custody or any of the other things. They use that as leverage. They cannot negotiate. They don't want the marriage to end because that ends their control over their victim. And so what I really felt compelled to do was find a way to focus on the light at the end of the tunnel in terms of getting the property sold, but also working with the spouse who is the victim of the abuse to better understand. It's not them. Now that's what gaslighting is all about. It's not you. It's they that have a problem, but you can't fix them. And that's when I aligned with various professionals that will help them move forward. And like I mentioned, Andrea's book is a great source, but it's all about learning and understanding why.
You brought a very wonderful point. You talked about narcissism.
The reality is, as I started learning about it and trying to teach and help, different groups about high conflict personalities, mainly narcissistic personality disorder, a lot of people going back a few years ago used to look at me and think only men can be narcissists. And since then, I've met many grown men who are afraid to show their emotion, just as vulnerable. And narcissistic personality disorder doesn't pick genders, but it's usually caused from upbringing and influences in their life earlier. But that's a whole other talk. But it doesn't pick gender. I have 2 daughters. I'm a single dad, and I've pretty much raised them both. So after my divorce, one of the things I learned from my coaches and therapists and people when I started on the divorce journey, never talk bad to your kids about their other parent, which I agree wholeheartedly. But as kids get older, they figured out. In fact, they figured out at a younger age. As they entered into their teens, I wouldn't say anything bad about their mother, but I didn't have to. They start realizing that one parent is giving them love and support and self-esteem and confidence and a safe place to talk. The other parent isn't. And so they gravitate to where they feel safe and loved. I like to think my kids are lucky to have me and this knowledge to be able to provide that. But to your point, a lot of my clients, friends, people in the social community that I've met, they don't have a support system. In places like Yellow Brick House, that's their best option.
And I want to thank you for opening up. Thank you for sharing your story to help bring an awareness of gender violence. Doesn't matter if you are a woman or a man or same-sex marriage, family violence exists. A lot of times, individuals that live in family violence, sometimes they don't realize they are actually being abused in a relationship. There is that feeling of shame, self-doubt.
Right.
It comes with so many things.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that through Yellow Brick House counseling services, that is something they do. They sit with you through their social work services, through their team, and they actually give you information and they show you the cycle of abuse and how it all shapes. As I am also a victim of an abuse, and through Yellow Brick House, those were some of the things that I learned in order to be able to move forward. So it's wonderful to be sitting with you today and seeing you to be so successful and bringing so much wealth and knowledge and helping people in moving forward.
Well, you're right. Everything you said about Yellow Brick House and everything you've said about how people feel, I couldn't agree more. And may I just add, if anybody wants to give a donation, that's always the first way you can help.
Definitely. Michael, what would you like to leave us with today?
First and foremost, for anybody who's feeling they may be a victim of emotional, mental abuse, narcissistic environment, which may and may also not include physical abuse, but certainly, any type of abuse, remember that it's not you and you can't change the other person. People go to mental health professionals if they're depressed or if they have different things they want to work about. A narcissist is never going to go say, I have to go get self-diagnosed. They don't know they're a narcissist. Therefore, you can't force them into therapy and you can't change them. You can only learn to shield yourself and respond differently. So the underlying message I would like to leave you with is don't feel it's your fault. There are solutions. Yellow Brick House, mental health professionals. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. So focus on that. If you're going through a marriage breakdown and you're going to have to sell a property and your spouse is trying to complicate things, again, high conflict personality or abusive behavior, I didn't write the book to become wealthy selling books. I give away more copies than actually sell, but there's a lot of great resources, and they're not just about rights to change the lock, who has to pay the mortgage, and real estate stuff, but there's also stuff there on how to communicate effectively with a spouse that is near impossible to communicate. So if you want the book, it's on Amazon. If you're going through something and you want to talk confidentially, like I said, I've built a trusted, vetted network of divorce professionals, mental health professionals. So everything anybody talks to me about is strictly confidential. So if anybody ever wants to call me, it's a safe place to talk. And then while I only focus on real estate, I'm happy to introduce you or guide you to Yellow Brick House or the places that will help you move forward.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Please look us up at YouTube for more upcoming events on Yellow Brick House Fundraising Summit.